So we got Jasima back with us. He was at the center with his family.
Jai
So
Baba, Jai Baba.
he's back there with the controls. So tonight, again, we've got Laurent Weichberger. I remember when Laurent first came to the center, he was like about, this is in the mid 80s somewhere. He was about, I think, 17 years old or maybe 19. He stayed in the upper room, I remember that, in the Green Cottage. And unlike most teenagers and their preoccupations and everything, Laurent was determined to find out everything about Baba as a young kid. And then somehow, and I'd like to hear how he got connected to Don Stevens. Don Stevens was one of the Baba's close ones from the West, very dear to Baba. He had actually, he had the permission to come and visit Baba anytime. He could just drop in on him. You know, he didn't have to write ahead really. I'm sure he did. But and Baba said about Don Stevens that he had a near perfect balance of head and heart. And I was hoping that Laurent can tell us, you know, how he came in contact with Don Stevens, I mean, among other things, and some of the exchanges. Don Stevens had a lot of different ways of remembering Baba and bringing him into his life. And a lot of people have done variations off of that, but he was great help in that. And then Laurent is going to share a little bit about or whatever on forgiveness and surrender. So, and he's always open to questions. And if you can come up with a question he can't answer, I'll send you a copy of God Speaks as a reward. But anyway, so uh, I think it was Don Stevens that called you Big Bear, right? That was
Well, so what actually happened was his entire time with me, he called me Little Bear until the last time I saw him, which was at Mahmoud and Nasreen Ajang's home. And Mahmoud took a picture of us together. And I think Mahmoud must be on the phone also with Nasreen. And he called me Big Bear. And I said, no, no, Don, remember, I'm the little bear. You are the big bear. And he said, no, no, you've graduated. That was the last time I ever saw him. And that was 2010 at Nasreen and Mahmoud's home.
yeah. Well, it's on to you, Laurent. But I would like to be. I'm very interested to hear how well, maybe your little early life there with Baba and how you got connected to Don Stevens and any
Sure,
exchanges you had with him.
sure, no problem. So what happened was I really didn't know Don at all. And I had been asked by Ann Conlin. It's a very long story, but I'll give the short version of this story. Do you remember Ann Conlin, Jeff?
Sure, definitely, yeah.
I, I was very fond of Ann, and we were friends from New York. And then she moved down to Myrtle Beach, and I was living in Georgia. And I had a project that I had to accomplish. I felt Baba was asking me to accomplish, and it had to do with helping people with getting off of drugs. So I spoke to Ann at Sheriar Books. That was when it was down south, not the current location. And I went to Sheriar Books to buy this pamphlet called God in a Pill to help people get off of drugs. I knew that Baba had said the most important spiritual work in the world today is to help young people to get off of drugs. Baba said that in the 60s. So I was trying to do some work on that. And then I went to Ann at Sheriar Books and I said, hey, how many copies have you got of this? Because I want to buy a whole bunch, you know? And she said, well, what for? I said, what do you mean what for? I want to buy them. Don't worry about that. She said, no, I don't just want to sell them to you like that. Tell me what you're working on. So I told her the project and she said, well, this is a very outdated message. The time that I was doing this was in the 1990s. So it was about 60 67, 68 that Baba had God in a Pill created. And so it was now like, 20, 30 years later. And Anne said, it's really outdated, this God in a Pill message. Would you rewrite it? And I said, what are you talking about, Anne? Because we were very casual. And she said, yeah, it needs to be redone. Would you rewrite it? And I said, no, but my heart said yes. So she said, just, would you try? So I said, okay. And I left with one copy instead of the many copies. And doing this work of rewriting God in a Pill, there was a story that I came upon of Don explaining to Baba. This is a true story. Don and Baba in India. And Don was working to help these young people in San Francisco to get off of drugs. And they were the hippies in San Francisco. And Don said to Baba, Baba, I think all these hippies are taking LSD. So I'm going to have to take LSD so I can help them and understand what they're going through and help them better to follow you. And Baba said, with lightning in his eyes, to Don, don't even think about taking this LSD. He said, Don, you have no idea. Even one trip of acid can permanently derange somebody so that they can't come back even in this lifetime. They will need a new body and a new brain to come back. But another person of a different type of nervous system, different type of, response to the LSD, they could take many trips and not have any damage. He said, but don't even think about taking it. It's extremely dangerous. So there was this whole story that I had come upon, and I put this story in the book I was working on called The Mirage Will Never Quench Your Thirst. So I was about to go to press with Andy Lesnick at Share Your Press. They were going to publish it. And I was about to go to press, and I thought, wait a second, I didn't double check this story with Don, and he's still alive. This is his story. So I wrote to Don, and I said, hey, you don't know me, but I have this story about you and Baba, and I would like to publish it, but can you please let me know if it's true and accurate? And he wrote back, I think the next day. He said, I'm so glad you wrote to me, because most people don't take the time or the energy to check these things. And he went line by line through the entire story. And he said, this is what Baba said. That's correct. He said, I'm sure Baba said this to somebody, but he never said this to me. And then he said, this is not what happened. He said, what happened here is, and he would give a whole paragraph of what Baba actually said. And one of the things that I didn't know that Baba said was, he said, you see these hippies taking LSD. It's like they've been given a finely crafted Swiss pocket watch as a gift, and they're trying to get into it using a crowbar. That's what Baba said to Don. Yeah, and Don said, and I knew exactly what he meant by that. It was so clear. So of course that story went in the book, and he just cleaned up the whole story. And then after that, I said, thank you so much for all you've offered, in fixing this story up and editing it and responding. I said, you didn't know me, and you went out of your way. And he said, yeah, that, I'm happy to do it. And I said, and, if I should never speak to you again, I just want you to know that if you should leave this lifetime not having written your autobiography, it would be a tragedy, because you have so many incredible experiences with Baba. If you don't capture that, the world would be at a loss. So please consider writing your autobiography. And if you say, I'm not interested, I would say, I would help you to do it. So he wrote back and he said, I'm not interested. So that's how I got started with Don. That was the initial exchange. That was that first start.
Yeah, beautiful. And so then, when did you wind up meeting him?
Well, then what happened was he asked me to write an article for his magazine. He was involved as an editor on a magazine in Europe called Neti Neti. He asked me to write an article for that, and I did. And then he said to me, look, I'm writing a book about intuition. He said it's called Meher Baba's Gift of Intuition, based on something Baba told me in Mandali Hall about intuition. He said, I've got all the chapters assigned to different authors. They're all Baba lovers. And we're going to get together in Myrtle Beach to go over the work before we publish it, to refine it and finalize it for publication. He said, if you'd like to come to that meeting, you won't be allowed to speak, but you'll be allowed to listen. So it'll be like auditing the sessions that we have of the authors who are sharing their material. Would you like to come to that? I said, you betcha I'd like to come to that. So I drove from Flagstaff, Arizona to Myrtle Beach, which was about 2,500 miles. And I audited his work meetings with this wonderful group of Baba lovers. And I wasn't allowed to speak. So instead I sat and I took notes about what I was hearing. And at the end of the first day, he said, what did you think about the meeting? I said, well, I have a lot of thoughts because I took notes and I was thinking about it all day because I wasn't allowed to speak. So I have a lot of thoughts that I wrote down. Would you like to hear what I wrote down? He said, yes, I would. So he was with his boyfriend, Claude, and they were going back to the Baba Center to make dinner. So he said, why don't you come back to the cabin? Claude's going to make dinner and we can talk while he's making dinner. So we went back to his cabin and I basically shared my notes with him about what I was thinking and feeling during the session. He said, well, that's very interesting. The next day was a repeat of the thing where people were sharing their chapters. I wasn't allowed to speak. So I just took notes and I contemplated everything. And he said, do you want to come back to the cabin again and talk? And I said, sure. So I went back and I shared again about what I heard and what I felt and thought. And he said, well, that's very interesting. And then on the third day of the sessions, he announced to the whole group that I was going to be writing a chapter. This was a funny thing about Don. He didn't really ask. He wasn't an asker. He was more of a teller. So he told the group before he even asked me. And I found out I was writing a chapter in this book by hearing it from him telling the whole group. So that's how I met him. Oh, I think you're on mute, Jeff.
In the exchange that Don had with Baba, what was the on intuition? What do you recall? What Baba said?
I do.
Don, yeah.
It's like you said earlier, Jeff. Baba had told Don, and I don't know the reason because I'm not sure Baba even explained the reason. He told Don, listen, whenever you're anywhere near India, you come and you see me. You don't have to write. You don't have to call or cable. You just come. And by the way, there was only about a handful of people on Earth that I'm aware of who had that kind of open door, besides the Eastern Mandali who would live with Baba. But for somebody to just pop in on Baba was extremely unusual. Anyway, so Don popped in on Baba, literally walked into Mandali Hall. And he said, when I walked in, Baba just started explaining out of the blue that every time the avatar comes, he gives an avataric gift to humanity. And Baba explained the advents, the previous advents, and their gift to humanity. He remembered two off the top of his head. He said, for example, Baba said, at the time of Jesus, the gift that Baba gave to humanity as Jesus was that of love. And he said, it doesn't mean that there's no experience of love before that, but that love was made more available, and it was like brought to the forefront of humanity in a way. And he said, and at the time of Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family, he gave the gift of tribal law and how to get along together in tribes. And that each time the avatar comes, he gives a gift. And he said, and in this Advent, as Meher Baba, my gift to humanity is that of intuition. And he said, like I said, it's not that nobody used intuition before my gift, but that intuition would be extremely freely available to humanity, so much so that they would make the big decisions based on their intuition, and then they would not discard logic and reason, but they would use logic and reason to check the results of what they were aware of via intuition, so that it would speed up the whole process of their life, in the sense that what might have taken a long time of research and analysis could be arrived at rapidly through intuition, and then the mind would be used to double check it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Yeah, Baba said that to Don, and Don took that very seriously, and so we wrote a whole book about that.
Yeah. Any other exchanges in that Don had with Baba that you recall?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch. I'm very close to releasing Don's authorized biography. It should be, Baba willing, this Christmas. But I've been collecting stories for 20 years about Don, and I put them in this book. But one I was reminded of before the meeting started was about this poem about saying thanks is risky or dangerous or something like that. That poem that I heard before we started reminded me of a story, which is extremely, for me, extremely poignant, which is that according to Don, he heard this. So he explained this to me, but he heard this, that one day, happened to be January 14th, one January 14th, Baba suddenly stopped what he was doing and removed his sadra from his body and handed it to Mara and said, I want you to fold this up and keep it nicely until Don returns. And of course she did that exact thing. So when Don made his next trip to Mehrabad and Marazad, Baba called for his sadra that he had been holding for Don. And of course, Baba was silent. So Mara explained, you see, Don, Baba took off his sadra on your birthday and asked us to hold it for you till you come as your gift. And he was so moved that Baba remembered his birthday by removing his sadra on his birthday. It's just unfathomable to me. He was so moved, and he would say many times during the visit, "Thank you so much, Baba. I don't know what to say. I'm just so moved by this." But he said something very interesting. He said Baba would look annoyed when he would say this. But at the end of the trip, he said to Erich, I had such a wonderful trip and, this beautiful gift from Baba, but there's one thing I don't understand. When I thank Baba for this beautiful gift of his sadra on my birthday, the way he took it off on my birthday when I wasn't even here, he looks almost annoyed. And Erich said, Don, of course, because Baba is you. You and Baba are one. How can you thank yourself? And so there was a giant lesson there from Baba to Don. It was not words. It was an expression, a facial expression, that this gift was a gift of oneness.
Beautiful.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. I know the Mandala used to say, that I would hear him say, don't thank Baba. They would actually say that, and it just, unless you have that kind of understanding, it doesn't quite make sense, But
Yep.
There's a deeper meaning behind it.
Yeah.
And now this is Laurent is open to questions, so he's a sitting duck there.
I love questions.
Yeah.
There's Diane Terry.
Hey, Laurent.
Hello. Jay Baba.
Did you ever have a discussion? I have two things. with Don about who he thought he was to Baba in previous lifetimes?
Yes, I did. When I was researching his biography, I moved to England for a year and a half to research Don's biography that I was writing by asking him questions. And I asked him that question. And he said something like this, but I put it in the book if you want to read the exact answer. But the gist of it is he said, I have absolutely no interest in past lives, and I've always felt that this current life is much more important than anything I experienced in the past. And he left it at that.
Beautiful, great.
And then my next question is, tell me if it's too political, but I always had heard that he was gay, and you just made his boyfriend. And we do know that there have been people of homophobic that disposition floating around who have aggressively separated and segregated and made to not feel welcome gay people.
Yeah.
And
is there a question?
did Don ever talk about being gay and being out in the Baba community? And did he know about the homophobic behavior that was, when did he pass?
2011.
So he was around during it then.
Oh yeah. So this is a great question. It's a great question. It's not too political. I don't put that in the category of politics. I mean, it's Mayor Baba community politics, but it's not politics in the literal sense. It's a great question. It's a very important question, actually. So I'm glad you brought it up. Yes, and at risk of having the whole meeting monopolized by this question, I'll try to keep it short because this is a very large question and a very large answer. So Don was not gay. He was bisexual. He had female relationships. He asked women to marry him. He was turned down. He even brought one of the women's names to Baba, and Baba said to him, "She's not the one for you." So this was not a homosexual man moving through the world. He self-identified to me and to others as bisexual. However, some people who are gay said he was more gay than bi. I've heard that. So there's a lot of gray area here. In any case, let's just go with bisexual for now. Don was acutely aware, and I brought it to his attention as well, that especially Charles Haynes, who I love, and his husband Christopher were persecuted, I would say, and abused verbally, if not in any other way, certainly emotionally, in their position at the Mayher Spiritual Center, and there was a giant rift. And I said to Don, in a video that I created about this subject, about various issues that I wanted to capture, I said to Don, how did you feel? How do you feel? What is the response that you'd like to give to what happened and is happening around homosexuality in the Mayher Baba community? And he gave like a one-sentence answer. I was extraordinarily disappointed. And after the video, we had dinner together, and I said, "Hey, Don, that was not the answer I was hoping for. You know so much more about this." And he was not out the way you think he was. He was not, there's various degrees of being out, and he was not living his life as a outed man of either homosexual or bisexual tendency. He was very much a private man in terms of his sexual life. So when I brought this to his attention over dinner, he said, "Well, you're right." And this is how we would talk. It was very casual and very real. He was very honest and real, and I loved him for it. And I said, you've got to say more than what you said on that video. That was almost nothing that you said. He said, "You're right. How do you want to do that?" And I said, "Well, knowing what we know about what's going on in the Meher Baba community, we should address it full on. We should bring it up. So we wrote to Darwin, Hermes. Well, what I said to him is, we should write to people who are on both sides of this issue, not just people who agree with us, because that won't help. Let's write to people on both sides of the issue. So we wrote to Darwin, Shaw, Hermes, Charles and Christopher, and many others in the Meher Baba community. And we said, let's have a panel discussion at the Meher Spiritual Center in Myrtle Beach to hash this out and get to some harmony around this issue. And believe it or not, everybody we approached, everybody on both sides of the issue, said no. It's true. So it was just Don and I, and we had the meeting anyway. And we had it in Myrtle Beach. The Meher Spiritual Center said,
What year was it?
the Meher Spiritual Center, it's not appropriate. So we had it off center at somebody's house, and it became a book called Sexuality on the Spiritual Path, the entire session that we gave. And, you know, Charles Haynes contributed to the book. Many others contributed to the book, David Carter and others. But at the end of the day, what's abundantly clear, and I don't want this to monopolize this evening, but what's abundantly clear is Meher Baba was fully aware of which of his lovers were lesbian, gay, bisexual. And you know what he did? He loved them. He loved them all. He would kiss them on films. He loved them. There was no, from what I can see and what my experience is, there was no judgment. If there was judgment, I had never heard about it, and I researched the hell out of this topic. So that's all I really want to say about it at this point. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Can you get a hold of that book, Spiritual Sexuality and Spirituality?
I created it. What do you mean, can I get a hold of it? I created it.
Can I get a hold of it?
Yes, you asked if I could get a hold of it.
No. I'm if that's how
Yeah.
you that's not
He's
what I
sitting
meant.
on top of them on his chair right now.
If you can't find one, reach out to 7 Macaulay in Asheville.
And I can get you that address or email. Looks like we got
Ginger Bus. I don't know the actual names, but as
no,
per
it's Ginger and
names,
Buzz. I guess he's trying to get his.
Hey, Baba, it's Buzz.
Hey, Baba.
Good.
We wanted to say hello to Laurent. Laurent introduced us to Don in Berkeley when Don came and gave a talk in Berkeley, and he introduced us. First thing he said to me is, "You look like trouble." And he brought that sadra to the talk, and at lunchtime, everyone left. And the sadra was there, and Ginger and I were there, and we said, we can't leave the sadra here. So we actually enjoyed being in the presence of that beautiful sadra while everybody else had gone to lunch. And thank you, Laurent, for that wonderful introduction and for the story of the sadra. We did not know how that passed, but it's even more special to us now. Thank you. Jai Baba.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I say a couple words about the sadra? Don would carry it with him in a terry cloth bag. You all remember a terry cloth? It's like a towel basically that was made into a bag that he would put the sadra inside, and he would put the terry cloth bag in his suitcase, and he would travel with it around the world. And the reason he would travel with it is he would then ask me to share it with Baba's lovers. He would say to me, don't let them put this under glass, is what he would say. He wanted it shared. So what I would do is I would drape it over a chair as if Baba was in the chair next to us. So I would always ask for an extra chair when we'd give a talk. And Don would want me to sit next to him. So I'd sit next to him, but I'd put a chair next to Don, and I'd put Baba's sadra draped over the chair as if Baba was sitting in the chair. And then Baba lovers would come up and hold the garment and put it to their face and hold it to their chest. And it was just accessible. One time we were in Dehradun, India, and it's the same thing. We had the extra chair and the sadra out, and people would come and put their head at Baba's feet by holding the hem to their forehead. And it's a long story, but eventually the meeting was over. I was putting the sadra back away into the terry cloth bag, and this couple came late, very, very late to the meeting. And I could tell she was pregnant. And so he was holding her hand, and they were kind of looking with big eyes and gesturing, but not saying any words about the sadra that I was putting away in the bag. So I took the sadra out of the bag and I threw it. I literally threw it, and the arms went around her, and the sadra just rested on her belly and her chest, and it was like Baba just Baba just took over, and they couldn't believe it. But I couldn't think of anything better to do. Yeah.
Where is the sadra now?
It's in the south of France. Don had created a group in France, and they have it protected and in their Baba group in France.
Peter.
All right, thank you, and hi, Laurent. I had a question that came up, and I had an idea to bring it up to whomever was speaking tonight. And when I saw your face, I thought maybe you are particularly able to answer this. Periodically, I hear people say, when it comes to emotional healing, you've got to feel it to heal it. And somebody in particular that I think is very qualified brought it. Oh shoot, my AC just went on. I heard it from somebody I think very qualified. Now the thing is, I've been practicing what I call the first cause meditation, which is me working on accessing a painful feeling or whatever it is I want to dissipate, and say Baba's feeling it. Now what happens though is, when I honestly attempt to feel it, the pain hides. And I asked a therapist about this through email, and they say, yes, it's typical, the pain hides and it needs to have some comfort to come out. And I was wondering, I have the question written out, if you could suggest concrete ways to coax the pain out of hiding. So I think to myself, I think it's a lot of past life pain. I want to resolve it, and I don't exactly feel I'm in a comfortable, not the safest environment. I don't feel that comfortable with Mayor Baba, but I have to work with what I have. I was wondering if you may be able to suggest some concrete ways to try to coax pain out of hiding, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean. Thank you for the question. While you were asking the question, I got a very clear answer that I'd like to share with you, if it's okay.
Yes, I just want to turn my AC off because it kicked on just as I was starting to speak. Okay,
sure.
Great.
Well, maybe if you can go on mute, that might help also, because we won't get the background noise.
Pretty off.
So thank you, Peter, for the question. The response that I heard when I was hearing your question was an experience I had when I was living in Arizona. I used to travel around looking at different natural places in Arizona near where I lived in Flagstaff. There was incredible things to experience there. One of them is a place called Red Mountain, and I went to Red Mountain with my family, and my daughter Aspen found a cave, and she said, "Daddy, I think you would like this cave." It was very dramatic in an old volcano in a beautiful cave. So I said, "Oh wow, this is beautiful. Thank you so much." So a few days later, maybe a week or two later, I spent the night at the cave. I went there and I built a fire, and I sat for hours repeating Baba's name. Nothing but Meher Baba. I think I sometimes would say Avatar Meher Baba, or sometimes I'd say Baba, but it was either Meher Baba, Avatar Meher Baba, or Baba for hours. And that night I fell asleep in the cave and I had a dream. And in the dream, it was my father. My father is one of the reasons I came to Baba. He had committed suicide when I was 16 years old. So in the dream, my father was visiting me, and he was extremely aggressive, and he was throwing darts at me and hitting me with darts. And I was in shock from the pain of my father's behavior, and I woke up. And I thought, wow, what the hell was that? Here I am spending hours focusing on Baba, and what do I get? I get my father throwing darts at me. But now, decades later, I can see that it was Baba bringing up the residue of the pain and the bizarre nature of my relationship with my father, in that, his suicide and me trying to let go, and the way that he would communicate with me or not communicate with me, and the kind of dynamics of my relationship with my father, which I guess I wasn't ready to really process until that night. But my feeling now is, by focusing on Meher Baba, he's the one who brings the pain up at the right time and in the right way. And to do it prematurely can be dangerous. Yeah, Baba.
Does that give you some something to go on there, Peter?
Yeah, I'm thinking, and thank you for that answer, Laurent. And I'm sorry to hear about your experience with your father. It just kind of hit me that's so tough. I think it is tough for anyone to go through. The thing is, though, oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, you deserve it. I'm trying to understand let's just say, with people that go through transcendental meditation, there's a specific protocol to go through. Would you be able to suggest? I did the first cause meditation in a model like transcendental, where I spent 20 minutes focusing. Would you be able to, I hate to say it, but like bottle what you're saying?
Yeah.
And I hate to say more concrete, but maybe put the lines closer together, how it could be a practice?
Yeah, sure. So as you may know, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's transcendental meditation was given by him at that time for his followers. Meher Baba gave 8 discourses on meditation in the discourses, where he talks about 2 different types of meditation. There's the impersonal and there's the personal. The personal means focusing on the master, like I was doing with Meher Baba. The impersonal is focusing on another aspect of God, which has no form and no attributes. So he said, you can decide which one is for you, but pick one of them and go with it. And he gives very clear instructions in those discourses about how to meditate. So I would refer you to Baba's discourses on meditation and the discourses. They're incredible and extraordinarily valuable.
So pick either between impersonal or personal.
Yeah, if you don't, you said you don't feel entirely comfortable with Meher Baba, so maybe you want to go the impersonal route, which is the formless infinite. But if you have the wherewithal to go with the personal, I would focus on Meher Baba. Baba said even he repeats his own name. That's how powerful his name is. So I would focus on Meher Baba's name, and if you can, his image.
I'm just
Any
writing.
other exchanges that you recall that with Don and Baba?
Say it one more time.
Any other exchanges that Don had with Baba? There in
Oh,
India.
yeah, absolutely.
Huh?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the one that you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, Jeff, is that at some point Baba just came out, again, out of the blue. He came out with this statement. He said, you know, Don has an almost perfect balance of mind and heart. That's what he said. And Don was a little surprised by this, actually. And then Baba repeated it at another time. And he began to realize that Baba saying this, he wasn't just saying it as some sort of compliment. He was saying it as a message. This is Don talking, by the way, not me. Don said he was saying it as sort of a message about the importance of it. And then he started to see that Baba had said it in other places as well. For example, in God Speaks, there's a little paragraph, a tiny little paragraph right before the first page of God Speaks, the actual text, where Baba talks about balancing the mind and the heart, and the, you know, the book that I shall make people read is the book of the heart, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, he realized that the balancing of the mind and the heart was important to Baba. So he started to practice it more and more, even though he was told by Baba he had an almost perfect balance of mind and heart. He started to practice it more and more. So I said to him, when I met him in London for dinner, I said, we had very casual conversations. I said, you know, Don, you've talked about the importance of balancing the mind and the heart and how Baba said that was important. I said, but I don't really know how to do that. And how do you do that? And he said, well, okay. He said, well, if you're in a situation and you're not sure about it, ask your mind, what do you think about this situation? And then don't make a decision, but pause and ask your heart, and how do you feel about this situation? And allow them both to have their full expression before you make any decision. And it was very simple and clear. And I thought, wow, a lot of this has to do with slowing down the process, not rushing in, not making knee-jerk reactions and ego-based decisions, but really contemplating, how does my heart feel? What does my mind think? And trying to weave some sort of balanced approach to the decision. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, beautiful.
It is really beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it because it's the slowing. This came up in many different situations where the slowing down was one of the keys to the success of the thing. Another one was about honesty. Should I tell that one?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're all very dishonest out here. You know?
Well, I also want to keep it open for questions, but this one's probably one of the most important. So let me tell the one on honesty, and then I'll open it back up for questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, great, excellent.
So Don told me this story. He said, look, he said when Murshida Rabia Martin dedicated her Sufi order to Meher Baba, she gave us all 2 weeks to make our decision whether we would continue with her under Meher Baba's guidance, or she would release us from our Sufi vows and we could go our own way. He said this was in 1945. And one of the other murids next to him was Ivy Deuce. They were both murids under Murshida Rabia Martin. And she was in earnest. This was not playing around. She said, I've already dedicated the order to Meher Baba, and I've dedicated myself to Meher Baba. And she announced this to them. You have 2 weeks to make your decision. Well, this threw Don into a tailspin, but I'm not going to tell that whole story, but I'll tell you this. Of course, they did go under Meher Baba. He and Don did. And Baba reoriented Sufism. Murshida Rabia Martin passed away from cancer. She never met Baba physically. She rededicated herself and her entire order to Baba sight unseen. All of the murids followed, including Sufi Samuel Lewis, and others. But in any case, when Baba got to reorienting Sufism, it was with Murshida Deuce and Don Stevens primarily. And the charter had a strong emphasis on honesty. And there was other things, you know, no sex outside of marriage and financial things and other things. But in any case, Don said the hardest for everybody to fathom was this thing about absolute honesty. He said, well, the sex was hard, but that was nothing compared to absolute honesty. So they were all talking, what does he mean? We have to be absolutely honest. So people would say to Don, you know, Baba better clarify this, because if I'm absolutely honest at work, I'm going to get fired. And another guy would say, if I'm absolutely honest with my wife, she's going to divorce me. What is he talking about? So there was a lot of energy around honesty. And Don said to Baba, you know, when you come, you really need to help us with this honesty thing that you put in the charter, because people are talking about it. So Baba came in 52 and clarified it to the Sufis. He said, okay, you've been asking me about what I mean about honesty. I'll tell you. And you got to bear with me, because this is a difficult explanation from Baba, but I heard it so many times from Don that I remember it. Baba said, okay, you're in a situation and you've got options about what you're going to share about what you know about the situation. And he said, most likely, most situations, not all situations, but most likely, you're not going to share everything you know. And that's not being dishonest. And he said, and most likely, you're not going to share nothing about what you know. And even if you decided to say nothing and you remain silent, that's also not dishonest. But most likely, you're not going to choose to say nothing, and you're not going to choose to say everything. In most situations, you're going to say something. But he was very clear that being silent is not being dishonest, and saying everything is not being dishonest, but it's unlikely that you're going to be in one of those extremes. He said, most likely there's some middle ground, some degree of what you know that you're going to share. And he said, okay, so let's take that case. He said, let's say you decide to share 70%. And I'm just making up this number. I don't know what number Baba used, but the gist of it was, let's say you decide to share 70% of what you know about a situation. He said, right, so you're sharing 70%, but in the back of your mind, you know that of the entire understanding you have, some of what you know is going to be perceived by the person hearing this as positive, and some of it's going to be perceived as negative. So if in what you decide to share with them, that 70% that you decide to share, if you omit the negative and you only share what's positive, you're being dishonest. He said, then again, if you decide to only share the negative and you omit the positive and spin it to some sort of negative slant, that's also not honest. So he said, now you're in a situation where you've decided to share 70% of what you know, but in that what you're giving to the recipient, there should be the right proportion. And it doesn't mean 50-50. The right proportion that's in what you know, in what you decide to share. Does this make any sense, Jeff?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I've never heard.
I know, it's really interesting.
Quite as clearly, yeah.
It's so interesting. This is like PhD level honesty. And I have a couple more comments about it, and then I'll let it turn into questions. But he said, now, so you've ascertained what it is you're going to share, and you've ascertained how much. And he said, in all of this, keep in mind that what you're trying to understand in what you deliver is, how much do they really have the right to know? Or another way of saying it, he says, is how much can they actually utilize of what you know? Like, there's a sense of like, what's really for them in all of this? And then you go ahead and share it. But there's so much that you have to do to really be honest. And this is what he explained. So when I heard this from Don, I was astonished, first of all, and I thought, holy cow. And one of the things that immediately struck me was, this process of honesty that Baba described, in my estimation, defangs and declaws honesty, which can be weaponized. There's a famous story of Erich being pretty hard on somebody, and Baba asking him and saying, like, what was that about? You know, and Erich said, well, I was just being honest. And Baba said, no, honesty is that which uplifts, not that which crushes. You know that story, right? And so there's a sense that honesty can be weaponized by the ego, and not the kind of Baba honesty. It's not the honesty that Baba wanted. So what Baba wanted was this very considered, contemplative honesty. That's what he told the Sufis. And so that's what we have in the way of, I think is an incredible story. And I've been trying, it's very, very difficult to live up to, by the way. I've been trying to live up to this. I do it at work. I do it in my personal life. And it's hard. It's very hard every time. And it does slow down the process, I can tell you. It slows down the process of what's going to come out of your mouth. It slows down the process of what comes out of my mouth so that I feel it's less opportunity for the ego to take over.
Would you give an example, like say of 70%, you're going to disclose 70%, and getting that balance between the positive and the negative? Can you give us something from your own life or a situation?
Yeah, sure. In Don's biography, I had to write a chapter. I felt I had to write a chapter about his relationship with Alan Ewell. Alan Ewell was a very interesting character. I've never met him, but I read about him in Lord Mayher, and I heard about him from Don. And I knew a lot about the story, but I thought to myself, okay, now I'm in this situation where I'm writing about his relationship with Don, and I know more. I know the 100%, or I can't know the 100% without talking to Alan Ewell. I know a lot, but I don't want to say all that. So I got to tell some of that. But in what I tell in the chapter, I want it to be balanced between positive, not 50-50 balance, the right proportion of positive and negative that I'm aware of. It's extraordinarily difficult to write. So I spent a lot of time writing it and sharing it with close friends, advisors, and saying, did I do this properly? Because I don't want to hurt Alan Ewell's feelings, but I also want to honor the fact that Don had a relationship with Alan Ewell. And I mean, Alan appears in Lord Mayher, so it's not a secret that they had a relationship, but it's a delicate operation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so you had to kind of thread the needle and
that's exactly what I said.
Not gloss over some of the negative side. Yeah.
Right. And there was some negative. And like most relationships, right? You could talk about all, I mean, I'm married. Vanessa and I have been together now 8 years and married 6. If I said to somebody, oh yeah, it's always great. Well, that's not honest. We fight, we have problems, but we get through them. We work it out. And that's part of being in a relationship. And I love the success of our relationship in spite of difficulties. That makes our relationship stronger. But if I said it was always great, well, that's not true.
Yeah. Oh, great. You know, what I'm thinking is, where, you know, on the East Coast, we're up to 11 o'clock. It would be wonderful to have you back, you know, because there's a lot more that you could share. But let's go on for a little bit longer, maybe 15 minutes longer. And if there are any questions that people have, you know, Laurent may have come across those very questions in his association with Don. But this is fascinating.
Elizabeth has a question.
Hi, Laurent. Nice to see you again.
Hi.
You know, what you said about honesty is fascinating. And I've been wanting some answers about honesty for a long time. And I just had an experience where I had to do just what you said. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done. And what it sounds like to me, and I mean, I'd like your insights on this based on your experience with Don and Baba and whatever. It sounds like when you look at honesty and try to be honest in that way, you're dealing with issues not only of being totally honest with yourself, or as much as you can be, since I do believe we all deceive ourselves. We kind of can't help it. But also this issue of valuation that Baba brings up in the discourses all the time. You know, that what we have often is a mistake in our valuation. We take big things as small and small things as big, and it's a question of valuation. It seems like when you're dealing with honesty, you're also dealing with issues of what do we value? What is the important value, and what is the other person's perspective, and what are they valuing that we may not be seeing? And then upholding what we do value and making sure we state what it is, in spite of the fact we might lose a friendship, lose this, lose that. I mean, anyway, I'd be very interested in your comments.
Well, what you're saying is great, Elizabeth. I'm not sure how much of a question there is, but you're making a lot of great statements. And I would say this about what you're saying. What you're saying for me points to what Baba said about Maya. And if you read the discourses on Maya, I believe it changes somebody's perspective on life. He said if you understand Maya, you understand half of the universe. That's what Baba said. And he said what Maya is a force that is not illusion. It's the creator of the illusion. Many people don't understand Maya. And he said, it makes you believe that that which is important is unimportant. That which is unimportant is important. And it changes the importance of things in a way that's, like he's saying, misleading or not true. So that's great. It's great because at the end of the day, what I know from Baba, from reading God Speaks and discourses in my life with Baba, is any thought that's other than I am God and you are God is a type of false thinking. So it's all false thinking unless it's I am God. So that's going to inform, of course, the honesty, but it's extremely impractical to just go through life with the I am God as a premise, because that's not my experience. So I believe that's true, but it's not my experience. So then I have to be practical, and practical spirituality says, well, I know this person, and I know that part of this story is going to be hard to hear. I know they're going to love to hear this other part that's really positive. So I have to be in a subjective standpoint, even though it's not the truth, because the truth is everything is one. But the truth of oneness isn't practical spirituality. So until I have the experience of everything being one, I have to be sensitive to the subjective reality of likes and dislikes and positive and negative. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and then the other thing is, how do you relate that to people in the world who've heard nothing about Baba and would not understand the I am God concept and would not really get the oneness? I mean, they might have the ideal of oneness, but...
So Baba said in the discourses, the way you do that is you come down to their level without losing your level of understanding. And you relate to them on their level until they can understand it from your level. And that's one of the things in, I think it's the Travail of the New World Order, or one of those discourses about, work for the spiritual freedom of humanity. But all those discourses are about how to work with people who don't know anything about Baba, and they might not even be spiritual, and gradually bring them up to a higher level of understanding. I do it at work quite a bit. And I get great feedback from my colleagues. They're like, I don't know how you do it. You maintain, and they tell me all these things that I'm doing. I maintain equanimity or whatever. And I say, well, Mayor Baba helps me or whatever. So they're like, what are you talking about? And very gradually they might learn about Baba and spirituality, but it's not fair to expect them to understand all this.
Right.
So you just come down to their level and you help them at their level. Thank you, Baba.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I know Jeff wants to wrap it up here soon.
Well, Laurent, dear Baba.
Oh, hi there, Rosalie.
Hi. Yeah, yeah. Last time you were at this late night, you cited about Jean Shaw when she heard that Narita was saying that Baba was speaking to her, that she got so irate. And I love that story, and I was wondering where you heard that. How did that come to you?
I can tell that very easily. Jeff, you still with us?
Yeah.
When
I
I
got
first
a
came,
phone call. I should mention that Angela fell off a bike and broke her ankle. So we're trying to get a walker, trying to get her a walker to her, you know.
oh my goodness.
So
I'm sorry.
there's a little kind of side drama going on here. But yeah, go ahead.
Did you hear Rosalie's question?
Yeah.
I want to make sure you heard it. Rosalie, when I was 18 years old, I worked on Rick Dryden's farm in Furabush near Schenectady. And he would say every now and then, stop what you're doing, take a shower. We're going up to see Darwin and Jean. And we'd just hop in his pickup truck and drive to Darwin and Jean's and have a meeting with them. And Jean was extraordinarily quiet. I don't know how well you knew Jean, but Darwin was a talker, of course, and Jean was super quiet. And it was the same pattern every single meeting. I'd sit on the floor because I was the new guy and I was the young guy, and I'd sit on the floor and listen to Darwin talk about discourses in Baba, and we'd read the discourse and discuss it. And then afterwards, we'd all stand in the kitchen in Schenectady in their house and have juice and cookies. And it was great, you know. And the only thing Jean ever said to me in my entire life was she walked over to me and she told me this story that I told you. I heard it from Jean. I have no idea why she told it to me, but she told me the whole story in her kitchen, standing with a Dixie cup full of juice in my hand when I was 18.
Wow.
Yep, that's what happened.
And of
I
course,
still don't know why she told me. She never told me why she told me. She just told me.
one other thing, and about Don talking about the spiritual bomb, Baba's words being the spiritual bomb. I wanted to hear more of what was said or what you've heard about that, because I believe they are. They feel like that to me, but you know.
Jeff, do I have time to tell that story?
Well, yeah, okay, go ahead. We've got Bob Yeager yet to ask a question, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's a long story, so should I
we
maybe
could save it. We could save it for when you come back another time.
Okay, it's quite long, Rosalie, that story, if I tell it properly.
But we will. But don't forget, Rosalie, keep that. Hold them to it.
Yeah.
Next time.
Yeah, I would like.
It's a great story. It's a great story. It's certainly in Don's biography, but it would take me probably 10 minutes to tell the story properly.
Yeah.
Bob, do you want to go?
Yeah, thank you. It just occurred to me that, this idea of sort of considered honesty contrasted with Baba so often emphasized just being natural. And it seems to me that those two things can be really at odds sometimes. So any comments that you have to make about that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I do. I think I believe what happens is the more you practice, this is just my belief. I'm not saying Baba said this. The more one practices Baba's version of honesty, which is contemplated and considered, the more one trusts oneself to be more spontaneous and natural, because the ego isn't looking for all these weaponized opportunities to do its thing. So, of course, being natural and spontaneous is important, but not if it's going to be hurtful. So one of the stories I remember that's not Don related, but it's Adi K. Rani related, is something like this, where almost never was Adi K. Rani alone with Meher Baba. Most of the disciples in Mandali would say they didn't have whole lot of alone time with Baba, but maybe Erich and Meher the most. But Adi said he almost never had time alone with Baba. And one time he was completely alone with Meher Baba, Adi K. Rani. And he took the opportunity and he said, Baba, is there some spiritual secret? Baba said, yes, there is. And Adi said, what is it? So Baba said, never hurt anybody's feelings. And it was not the answer I think Adi wanted to hear at all. But for me, when I heard this story, I was like, well, of course, because it's the hardest thing. And if I allow myself to be, natural and spontaneous, I'm sure I'm hurting people's feelings quite a bit. So until I get to the point where I can be honest and mindful enough of not hurting people's feelings, I'm gonna take the safer road on this one.
That makes great sense. Thank you very much.
Really good. One last question, and then we'll if Tracy, if you could end with one of your poems.
Oh yeah,
it would be great. Sorry to spring it on you here, but anyway.
Well,
go ahead.
I know Tracy has a poem about surrender. I would love it if she would read that.
Oh, let me pull it up while you're answering the next question.
Yeah.
I know it's in the book about surrender with Meher Baba. You might find it in there.
I've got it on my computer, my friend.
Okay.
I want to say hi to my friend Tony Paterniti. I haven't seen him in quite a while. He's my old friend from New York.
Hey, Laurent, it's good to see you. It's good to hear you.
Hey, Baba.
Jay Baba. I just wanted to add one, since we're at the end, near the end. One thing I particularly treasured about Don was his focus on Baba's words about being connected to him and to each other through inner links, and the immense value I find in remaining conscious of those links and becoming more conscious of those links, and how that creates almost at an unconscious level a sort of group mind which enhances one's intuition.
Yeah, that's a great statement, Tony. If I could say a few words about that,
you bet.
I think it might help. Don based that entire belief and understanding on Baba's last message on the alphabet board. So if you get a hold of that, it's in Lord Meher, but it's also in other places. It's called The Last Message on the Alphabet Board, because it was the last message Baba dictated on the alphabet board. He knew that his last message would get special attention, being the last message he dictated on the board. So he put a lot in that message, and that's all in there. And what I believe Don would say if he was sitting with us today is, the inner links that are forged between souls doesn't happen unconsciously. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens through dedication, sincerity, and effort. And he made extraordinary efforts. I'll just tell you one tiny story and you can make what you want out of it. He made extraordinary efforts to meet with these people especially in Europe, but also in America and other places. And one of them, just one of them, who I talked to, Bruce Milburn is his name. I said to Bruce, how long have you been meeting with Don monthly like this? And he said, monthly? 30 years. 30 years of monthly dedication of creating and maintaining that link. So that's an extraordinary level of commitment.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Laurent. Also, the other thing I just wanted to mention was the focus on companionship, and that I felt an instant connection with Don from when I met him when I was about 20, I guess. But the sense of him being such, while having a clear, respectful distance, being one of the most intimate people I've known in my life, who really could connect with you at a heart level in an instant. Wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah, and to that point, Tony, Don's focus on companionship, he didn't make that up either. What happened was, it's a very, very long story, so I'm not going to tell it right now, but Don interviewed Erich and the women Mandali about what it was like to be on the new life. And at the end of the story, after many days, and they were taking audio tapes, which became the book, Tales from the New Life with Meher Baba, Erich said, well, Don, now that I've told you what you've been asking me to tell you for years about what it was like on the new life, what do you think? And Don said, well, I just can't even fathom how you all could bear with that kind of hardship. And it must have been so difficult. And Erich said, well, Don, then I've failed you. And Don said, what? No, what do you mean? He said, no, Don, I've failed you because I've failed to communicate the incredible nature of companionship with Baba on the new life and what companionship with the avatar means. And so I have failed you, and that's what sustained us through everything. I didn't experience hardship. I experienced the glory of companionship with Meher Baba. And that made such an impression on Don that he shifted after that his entire focus towards companionship.
Beautiful. Wow. Amen. Wow. I say to people, like, you know, these are our internal links right here. This is our support system for the next 700 years. You're looking at it right on your screen. Okay, Tracy.
Okay. Well,
and after she finishes, let's have a few moments of silence.
Laurent, thank you so much for sharing what you shared. It's been really uplifting. I've enjoyed it so much. So this is a poem called How Long, and it's in the back of Laurent's book about surrender with Meher Baba. In this garden of your making, I am weeping. My loneliness knows no bounds, and you, hidden at every turn. What is beauty without you near? Only grace can dust my lips with color and bring brightness back to my eyes. I have been given everything, and yet I am parched and broken. Like a bird who has forgotten how to fly, I am. Like a rose with no fragrance, I have become. Come back, you say. But I am frightened you may ask too much or take everything I have mounted into my sack. Return, you say. I glance at the place where I once wore your ring. Its imprint still shows upon my finger. Surrender, you say. And suddenly the gate swings open to the inner courtyard where you have been, Baba, all along. The moon, a reflection of my sorrow for how long I have been away from you.
Beautiful. Mm. Jai Baba. Jai Baba. Wow. Laurent, that was beautiful. Boy, you took us for a beautiful tour of many wonderful insights.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and we're like I say, we're not letting you use up all of your material there. We're gonna we can have you come again. That was really good. And you didn't even get into surrender and forgiveness. You didn't even get beyond God Stevens. But this was great. Yeah.
All of these subjects go so deep that, like just forgiveness alone, I've spent 2 days, 4 2-hour sessions just going over Baba's statements on forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you, and yeah. Any last minute comment or?
I so appreciate your taking Baba's words and helping people see them from an everyday perspective, a practical perspective. That's so helpful, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to share that thing about companionship, how important it is. And I remember Mara saying, although it was the most difficult time for her with Baba, it was her favorite time because he was a constant companion. So,
Right.
Okay, well. No one seems to be leaving here, I think. Where's the chai?
Hey, Jeff, these used to go until 12 o'clock. I guess you changed that format?
Well, it's, there are people that also have to work tomorrow. And plus, like I say, we'll get Laurent again.
That's a great idea.
You still got,
I think my track record's pretty good, Jeff. Every time you invite me, I say yes.
Yeah. Next week it's going to be Hunter and Bradley.
Oh.
And Hunter had to go unexpectedly away, and so Laurent, just at the last moment, he, wonderful. He just stepped up and was available. So.
May I say something?
Yeah.
I really love the way Laurent brought in all the discourse material and kept referring to it. It made me realize I need to go back and read more in the discourses. Every single one is so amazing. And I used to read one every night, and I think I need to get back to that. But thanks.
Yeah, they have direct relevance to our personal life here with Baba.
Well, and for what it's worth, when we get together next time, the story about atom bombs of spiritual energy came from Baba asking Don to edit the discourses. So Rosalie is onto something, and I will tell that story, but to do it justice, you can't rush through that story. It's lengthy.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Jeff?
Well, yes.
I wanted to say that the meeting last week, when you started with that list about topics about Baba Lover's relation to the world,
Yeah.
I felt like there was still a lot to address from that list, and it would be great to do another meeting on that sometime.
Yeah, I think so. Some of these we've had like say an hour and 15 minutes or something like that, but we can they can orbit back again because it's pretty hard to unpack some of these subjects.
Yeah.
And so many people have different camera angles, and I find it very valuable to hear, people's experiential view of these different issues.
Right.
Because you can hear something that you haven't even considered that will work for you in your own life with Bob, that someone else has discovered and is living in their own life.
Good.
Okay, well, Laurent, I don't know. I mean, who's going to leave? Okay.
Nazreen, the bouncer.
Wait. We have Nasreen. Nasreen is the bouncer.
Yes.
In the tavern.
Okay. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Thank you. Jai Baba.
Wow.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.